Okay, so this tutorial is going to be a reminder refresher on how to create a frequency table or histogram for data that you have put into classes. So if you remember, when we're going to make classes, it is essential that we follow two basic guidelines. The first guideline says that the classes all need to be closed. So every class should have a start and end value. You should not just say something like 10 or more or less than 5. You should always have them closed one number to the next. The second rule is that the classes need to be equal widths. So you shouldn't have one class that has 5 values in it and another class that has 8. They should all have 5 values if one has 5 values. So using that information, we can go ahead and begin making our frequency class data. So going to the variable view tab, of course, you want to name your variable appropriately for whatever it is. Here, this is just called freq, for short for frequency of something occurring. Whatever the variable is, you can name. Now, if you remember, there are rules. So when you name variables, you can't start it with a number. You can't have spaces, so I couldn't do a space. It won't take that as a variable. I'll get an error. So this has certain rules, but you can label it whatever you want to. So if I wanted to say something like that with spaces and everything on the label, I can do that. This label name will then show up when I do my data analysis. So the things that are important to check before we try to make our class data is first, make sure you have your type as numeric. And second, you need to have your level of measurement as scale or ordinal. You can't do it with nominal data. So we're going to call this data scale. Now we're going to go to transform. Under transform, we're going to go to visual binning. It'll bring up the variables you have in your database. In this case, we only have one, and we want to bin that variable. So we're going to slide it over, and then we'll hit continue. So it'll bring up this window. The first thing you need to do is click on the variable that you're going to put into bins. Next, we need to give the new variable a name. I'm going to call it classes. Okay. Here you see it tells us the minimum and the maximum value. So if I wanted to make 6 classes and my values go from 1 to 17, I could do something like make 6 classes of width 3, which would cover 18 data points, which would give me plenty of span to cover mine. So that's what I'm going to do in this case. So to make this, I'm going to make cut points. The location of the first cut is where you want the top of that class to be. So we're going to make that cut at 3. Okay? We want to make 6 total cut points, and we want every one to be equal width, size 3. So our last location will be 18. So this is the first cut, the total number, and the width of each. We then will hit apply. You see that it puts your cut points in appropriately. So you see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 cut points. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 classes of data, which is what we want. Down here you see that this has the high value where the cut occurs. So we're going to put the labels that our data starts at 1 and goes to 3 for the first group. This one then picks up at 4 and goes to 6, 7 to 9, 10 to 12, 13 to 15, and 16 to 18. So you'll notice if you count those out, they all cover a span of 3 scores, as they should. So once we put those labels in place, we can hit OK. It's going to tell you that it's going to make a new variable for your classes variable. And there you go. So you see now we have a classes variable. Every value takes a score from 1 to 6, as it should. And you see under variable view that our values have automatically been applied, right? Now we don't have a class 7, so we can just remove that if we want to. There are no scores there. There's no value there. But so there we have our scores from 1 to 6 for all of our data points. Okay? So this data, it automatically calls ordinal, appropriately so. And from this then, we can make our histogram and frequency table. To do this, we'll go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. Then we slide over the variable that we just made, the classes variable, because that's the one we want to make a frequency table for. So you see the boxes checked by default to make a frequency table. And then to get a histogram, we want to go to Charts and then choose Histogram. Hit OK. And we'll get our output. So our output, you see, says that we visually binned these values. There they are. Here is our frequency table of the class data appropriately labeled and all the frequencies for that range of each class. And here is the histogram of that class data. So there you have it. That is how you can create frequency tables and histograms for data that has been put into classes in SPSS.